Hey folks, BlackCross here. Welcome to another video review. Today's review, we're going to be looking at Dark Souls. Sekiro. Cuphead. Code Vein. Now, before we get into the actual review itself, I want to go ahead and kind of brush up on a few things in regards to Code Vein itself. A couple years ago, we got a teaser in regards to some form of a vampire fighting a giant monster of some kind. And at the same time, we didn't really know what it technically was in some regards. But then later on, it was revealed that it was going to be some kind of anime mishmash with Dark Souls element in it and stuff. And that's essentially what we ended up getting. However, though, the game got pushed back a couple of times, actually. In fact, what was funny, it was originally supposed to release in 2018. But then, about a month after they first revealed that date, it got pushed back. And we didn't get another update until the following, I believe, January or February of that year. I forgot when we got the actual reveal itself, but we finally got the reveal saying September of 2019. And it finally came out, and I finally got to play it, actually. And how is Code Vein? It's actually really good. It's surprisingly really good, really, when you think about it. The interesting thing about Dark Souls, as to why it is so interestingly fun for so many players to grab onto and play it despite the difficulty, is the amount of builds you can make within the game itself. Like, you can start from scratch and you will always have a different build character at the end of it all. You know, you can build them however way you want to. You can either build a caster, strength build, dexterity build, so on and so forth, and the numbers never end. Everyone's always making challenges with Dark Souls, and despite its difficulty, it is very well known, to a point where now we get these days hearing the phrase, the Dark Souls of this genre, or the Dark Souls of that genre, when in reality Dark Souls is not a difficulty, it is an actual game. So if you're going to say it's a Dark Souls inspired game, it's gotta have similarities other than just difficulty. But with that being said, though, Code Vein is a Dark Souls clone. However, though, I think this one does better as being a rival of Dark Souls rather than a clone, per se. And I say rival because, technically speaking, the same people who helped develop Dark Souls, aside from From Software, was also Bandai Namco. Bandai Namco actually helped make Dark Souls, so who better to make a Dark Souls clone than a company who technically took part in making Dark Souls. While they didn't develop Sekiro or Bloodborne, they did help make Dark Souls the way it is. So they actually have a familiar idea as to how to make Dark Souls a Dark Souls game. And so they took that element of gameplay style and turned it into what Code Vein is by adding vampires, post-apocalyptic gameplay, and so on and so forth. But there's one extra interesting part about Code Vein, but we will get to that after I talk about the game itself. So Code Vein, much like how Dark Souls has played in the past, basically you have the ability to build your character in the best anime form way. In fact, updates are being added as we speak as to how much detailing you can do with the costume and everything like that. And the options are insane. I've stated in my live stream of playing the demo for Code Vein, but it was just insane of how the customizations were. It was never ending, really, when you think about it all. After the customization, the gameplay is where it begins, where basically you have your basic attacks, then you have your strong attacks, but then you have some other elements. You have another element known as Icors. These are what you would call spell points to cast spells, buffs, so on and so forth. And so depending on how you make your build, depends on if you're going to be casting a lot of spells, or a lot of buffs, or resistance, so on and so forth. And probably what's even more interesting about Code Vein than what it is in Dark Souls is that there is another element in Code Vein known as blood codes. These are essentially what you would call your builds for the game itself. Now, you're probably asking yourself, how do you level up in the game? Well, you level up normally, actually. When you level up, you increase your HP, your stamina, and your attack power a little at a time. And that is it. That's all that levels up in the main game itself. how your defense is built and how your actual character is built is completely up to you based on the armor, based on the weapon, as well as based on the blood code that you're technically using. In fact, the blood code actually is more or less the foundation of the build itself. And so depending on the blood code itself, depends on what type of weapons you can wield, or depending on the type of armor you can potentially wear. Or in this case, blood veils, as they're called, technically speaking. They are, of course, the defense in the game, but they also add in an extra element in that regards, and that is the fact that they are blood drainers. They basically drain ichors from enemies and stuff, to where you can actually use abilities and stuff. And so there's actually a lot of blood codes that can be unlocked in this game. Some of them can be missed, actually, depending on your playthrough. And I say depending on your playthrough is because technically this game does like what Bloodborne and Dark Souls and Sekiro is known for, and that is multiple endings. Depending on the ending depends on what goes on and what happens, and based on what you do in the game depends on the ending of the story. For example, the main point of the game is to actually interact with successors. These are basically the bosses that you will be fighting later on in the game in order to change the fate of the game story. You can either save the successors or you can ignore them and let them rot. And depending on the situation, depends on what blood code you will end up later on. For example, if you let them die straight up, you can get the potential inheritance blood code ability. If you let them live, you'll get that actual character's blood code. Another way of attaining blood codes, actually, however, is to interact with other characters. The biggest point, actually, is being in the main hub of the game, where you can talk to other characters in the game, and they will give you their blood codes. Some of them are actually essentially useful, really, when you think about them. Some of them are very interesting, and some of them actually provide quite some good abilities that can come in hand depending on your build entirely. And this is actually the main reason why I like Code Vein in comparison to like Dark Souls or Bloodborne for that matter. The reason why I say I like it better is because where in Dark Souls and Bloodborne, depending on your build, you can't really change it as easy. You know, in later Dark Souls game, you can change stats on your character. The only problem is that the only way you can do that is if you go to a specific NPC and you can only change it for a limited number of times. Like in Dark Souls 3, you can only change it upwards to 5 times. In Code Vein, however, switching builds is as simple as switching a pair of underwear. That's the best scenario I can give, unfortunately, but is true. You can just switch the blood code into whatever blood code you want to use, and it's just that simple. Yes, you have to readjust the abilities and your armor and weapons, but aside from that, it's that easy. You can switch the abilities, and you can switch between doing a pure strength build, to doing a caster, to doing a tank. However way you want to build your character, the blood code is the main foundation, and by switching that blood code, it then reconstructs the build entirely. So if you have several builds you want to build on your own, you can technically do that on one profile. In fact, another interesting thing that I really like about the game is that you can create your character however way you want to. And you can save characters like you could in Dark Souls and Bloodborne. You can save the creation of the character. But here's another cool thing. You can actually change in mid-game the actual character looks entirely. So in other words, you build your character, you save it, you build a different character entirely. You can actually switch between the two characters that you build in a single profile, male or female. And this is actually interesting to know that you can play a single profile, yet at the same time you can switch between characters and builds in a single profile, which makes this, in my personal opinion, probably a better version than Dark Souls, really. And this is kind of a weird way of saying it, but it's almost close to being better than Bloodborne. Now, what do I mean by being close to being better than Bloodborne? Well, these blood codes do a lot, actually. They're more than just abilities that you can get. They're more than just casting spells. They're more than just buffs. They add an extra layer of combat to the game itself. For example, there are actual abilities to which you can pull off maneuvers depending on the weapon you're wielding. For example, if you're wielding a heavy weapon, you can use a heavy weapon move. If you're wielding a Ballet, which is basically your gun. You can use an ability that allows you to use that gun in a different moveset. If you have a halberd or a staff or whatever, same difference. This adds an extra element of combat difference. And that difference is based on the drainage in which you can drain enemies' powers to build up your I-core. It's sort of like the same way with Kingdom Hearts, where in Kingdom Hearts 1, when you were fighting Heartlesses, your magic does build up over time. And I liked that. I really liked that. That's my personal favorite out of Kingdom Hearts 1, because it's a risk and reward. Yes, you have to build up your magic the hard way, but you're having to fight the enemy, and in return, you're gaining magic that you can use against the enemy. You're building up a more powerful spell in order to use it against the enemy. The same way can be said for Code Vein, in which when you attack an enemy, or if you use drain attacks, you can build up your I-core to where you can use more abilities and use different buffs and debuffs and so on and so forth, and it makes the game more interesting in that regard. And in my personal opinion, I kind of like this better, actually. This is interesting. There is, however, two small things that I have with Code Vein itself. One of which is not a big deal, depending on how you look at it. The other one, it can be a mood killer, actually, when it comes to the game. So, the two problems that I have, problem number one is that the main game itself can be short. Now, I say it can be short, but depends on how you look at it. For example, your first playthrough will take a long time because the areas themselves are they're not really massive, but they're so confusing, you can and you will more than likely get lost a handful of times. For example, the worst area that I have to put up with is that known as the Cathedral. That is literally a Mobius strip mess of a maze that you will get lost for days. I think the first time I got through the Cathedral, it took me like 3 days of playtime just to finally get through that area, and I got pretty over leveled by that point, but even still, I was like, God, this is giving me such a headache, because there were so many twists and turns. Everything looked the same, and I was like, oh God, please tell me I'm close to the end. And unfortunately, you're not. It's a very big area, trust me. There will be times you'll get lost. But by building the map, when you finally get it complete and you go through a second playthrough, that map is there. You don't have to worry about looking to update the map. It's already there, so you can kind of use that to your advantage in order to get through the second or third playthrough. If I were you, I would recommend going to like either Fighting Cowboy or some other YouTuber that you follow who plays Code Vein or Dark Souls, to where you can kind of get an idea of how to collect stuff and everything like that. But again, despite the fact of how you can get lost in the map, the game itself is fairly short. You can actually, depending on how you go about it, you could easily beat this game in like a matter of a couple of hours, actually. You could probably beat it in like 4 or 5 hours, really, in tops. Another issue, and this is another small one, really, is that if you get over leveled, you can't master the gifts. Now, what do I mean by mastering gifts? Well, these are the abilities that I was mentioning about in the blood codes. These blood codes have different sets of abilities, and these different sets of abilities you can carry over to other different builds if you master them. Now, you can master them by having them equipped to you at all times, and as you're defeating enemies, they'll build up to where you can master them, and then you can use them anytime you want to. The other way is by attaining awakening codes, to where you can spend them to master them. So you can either do it the easy way, which is to fight enemies, or you can do it the hard way and try to get the code awakening that you need in order to master them quick and easy. But if you are over leveled in an area, you can't master that gift. That was something that I found out real interestingly, because I was trying to figure out how to grind to master gifts, and I found that little interesting fact out. The only way you can master them is if the enemy is actually stronger than you are. If you are stronger than the enemy, you can't master them. Be careful when you over level yourself. I would recommend leveling at like maybe 100 or 120, depending on your comfort zone, and then stopping from there, because if you over level, you won't be able to master gifts as easy as you would have liked to have. And trust me whenever I say this, there's a lot of gifts in this game. There's a lot of abilities, and this is base game. This is before DLC. There are announcements of how there are more maps, there are more bosses, and there'll be more blood codes available in-game. Keep in mind, the base game alone has a lot of blood codes, and there are a lot of abilities that you can get from them. So really, in all honesty, it's not so much of an issue, it's just a small complaint that I have, and it can be resolved relatively fine. The big issue that I have, however, is the main game itself, and is part of the issue that I think might have been the reason why I was pushed back so much, and that is the frame drops. There are literal frame drops in this game, and you will see them. You will see them when you come across them, whether you're traversing to another area or when you encounter a small section and in the distance you see enemies, and it may not even be that far of a distance, but for some reason, because there's like a different boundary in order to get around it and stuff, the enemies are very stagnated in frame drops, and you will see that, and it kind of hurts it a little bit, in my personal opinion. Thankfully, it doesn't hurt in terms of the main game. That doesn't slow it down, thankfully, but when you're exploring, it can actually frame drop during that time period, and that can hurt it. I'm going to give you a small little tidbit as to how I was able to kind of counteract this, keyword kind of, because I felt like maybe this was part of the reason why the frame drop was so bad. Turn off the character dialogue during exploration, and trust me whenever I say this, you'll want to do it. They'll eventually start repeating themselves of what to say and stuff like that. It's almost as bad as the Kingdom Hearts 3 looks like this will be a fine place to find some ingredients type thing. You know, it's kind of like that, but thankfully you can turn it off via the menu. So that's nice to know, and that I feel like that kind of helps the frame drop reduction, but not so much, actually. There is still some frame drops, and I think it's just mostly from traversing from different area to different area. And that's kind of weird, because Dark Souls doesn't have this problem. Yes, there are frame drops in, like, Blight Town and stuff, but it's not bad as, like, Code Vein, where you're going from, like, one area to another. Again, it is very noticeable, and you will see that. This was from the PS4 version, and I'm pretty sure I've heard people say that both the Xbox and the PC also suffers from frame drops as well, but your mileage may vary depending on the PC build that you've got, of course. Overall, despite how I have a problem with like the map themselves getting lost and everything like that, followed by the frame drops, the game itself is by far one of the funnest Dark Souls quote-unquote clones I've ever played, and in all honesty, there's not a lot of quote-unquote Dark Souls successors, clones, so on and so forth that we have, actually. The only other one that I could think of is that of Lords of the Fallen. Despite that, Code Vein is really good, and I think anyone who is interested in wanting to play a different type of Dark Souls game, they'll get some enjoyment out of this one because of the blood codes themselves, and the different gifts and abilities that you can get in this game. And so Code Vein, in my personal opinion, gets a 4 out of 5 stars. I highly recommend this game personally myself. As a fan of Dark Souls and Bloodborne, this is a really fun game. In fact, if you are a major fan of Bloodborne, this would be your second favorite game, actually, because this kind of plays in that same form of risk and reward, being that if you play aggressive, you'll actually gain ahead in the game. For example, I built a character where I had to be extremely aggressive to the enemy, and not only did the enemy stagger, but I got more I-Core to where I can keep casting the abilities and stuff. So essentially, you can build an OP character relatively good. Once you get enough blood codes and master them, you can get quite a good amount of abilities and be a major boss in this game. I kid you not, this is actually the funnest game I have played when it comes to a Dark Souls clone-like game, and this is really a good one. I highly recommend it to anyone who is interested in wanting to find another Dark Souls-like game. But that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video and review. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think about Code Vein? And let me know in the comments below, are you excited for the DLC that's coming out for Code Vein? Because I certainly am. I can't wait for it, and hopefully I'll play it as soon as it comes out, if I'm not too busy with something else. But thank you so much for watching, and I shall see you in the next video. This is BlackCross signing off. Catch you guys later.